So I'm going to invite Etienne, who is the Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion, Associate Dean for Student Affairs, and Associate Professor of Neurology and Medicine at New York Medical College, and an epileptologist. And he's going to talk about retaining and promoting a diverse workforce.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak here. Which is the forward button?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, for the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be speaking to you about the importance of recruiting, retaining, and promoting a diverse workforce in epilepsy. I have no disclosures, learning objectives, understand the benefits to having a diverse workforce in epilepsy, and understand the strategies to increase recruitment and retainment of a diverse workforce in epilepsy. Interestingly, as I sat in the audience, a lot of the things I'm going to say have been said, but I'll just be providing some additional background. So I want to start with some definitions. One is, I know we've heard it a lot this morning, diversity and inclusion. So I'll start with diversity from the AAMC. Says diversity is a core value that embodies inclusiveness, mutual respect, multiple perspectives, and serves as a catalyst for change resulting in health equity. In this context, we are mindful of all aspects of human differences. So when we talk about diversity, oftentimes people automatically jump to race and gender. But I want to make sure we're clear here that we're talking about socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, language, nationality, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, geography, disability, as we saw someone speak about earlier today, and age. So all those things encompass diversity. And then when we talk about inclusion, it's rare that you'll ever hear somebody say diversity and not hear the word inclusion right afterwards. And they're two separate things, but they're very much related. And inclusion is a core element for successfully achieving diversity. Inclusion is achieved by nurturing the climate and culture of the institution through professional development, education, policy, and practice. So you really, if you want to have diversity, you really need to be looking at the inclusion. If you're going to have dinner guests, be ready to receive them in the appropriate way. The objective is creating a climate that fosters belonging, respect, and value for all, and encourages engagement and connection throughout the institution and community. So in essence, diversity is the mix of people, and inclusion is ensuring that the mix actually works. And another way of looking at it is to say, I like to party, so I'll say diversity is being invited and attending the party. Inclusion is dancing at the party. And belonging means you actually are enjoying the party. And the way you'll know somebody's enjoying the party, I always ask this question to the applicants to the medical school. You see a big smile on their face, and they don't want to leave. That's what we call retention, right? So that's what you want to strive for, is belonging. We've all heard these terms also, the social determinants of health. There are a lot of social determinants of health. They include economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, community and social context, and the healthcare system. And all these things, when you look at the conglomerate, can contribute to the mortality, morbidity, life expectancy, really your patient's overall health outcome. And I encourage you, as you treat your patients with epilepsy, try to envision which of these social determinants are actually impacting their outcome. I saw a lot of talks throughout this conference talking about the big treatment gap and people aren't getting surgeries like they're supposed to. But in order to actually close that treatment gap, you have to start looking at these social determinants of health. And if you're not talking about it, you're not going to be able to close that gap, unfortunately. And you want to start thinking about how do we craft and implement solutions to address these actual social determinants. One more social determinant is race. So yes, race is a social construct, and it does have a tremendous impact on your patient's health outcome. And in order for us to, again, to address this gap, you need to understand how this actually impacts health equity. Medical mistrust, we've all heard that, and everybody jumps to the Tuskegee, the U.S. Public Health Service study on syphilis in the men of Tuskegee, Alabama, Henrietta Lacks, and all these other, there's a lot more, and it's still happening today. So you don't have to look back to Tuskegee to say this is why African Americans, Hispanic patients, and others don't trust the medical community. implicit bias. We heard a little bit about that earlier today. And it's a subconscious bias that people have, and you often will see people who say, well, I don't have a bias bone in my body. And meanwhile, in the next breath, they're like completely like slaughtering somebody. And I'll give you a quick example. Was when one of my students was with his surgeon. They're working on, they just saw a patient, and the physician comes back and says to the student, "You saw that patient? I didn't bother to do a lot of counseling with that patient because I already know that patient's going to go back to their rabbi to get the actual advice. So I'm not going to bother explaining the whole thing." And what that surgeon didn't know is underneath this student's surgical cap was a kippah or a yarmulke. And he didn't even realize that. And that same person will turn around and say, "I have no bias bone in my body. I don't have implicit bias," because they don't really actually understand what that actually means. The fact that it's actually second nature to them to actually attack people in this way. So when we say if race is a social construct, right? A lot of times at the end of the talk, somebody says, "Oh, it's a social." Why do we need to measure it? Why bother, right? Because you're just going to create division. Well, the reason we have to measure it is that each time we take a look, we see significant problems, right? So they looked at access to neurological care. And we see that black patients are 30% less likely to have access to a neurologist. Hispanic patients, 40% less likely to see an outpatient neurologist. They see them all the time in the ER, right? So if you don't measure it, you're not going to know it's a problem, and you're not going to be able to actually address it, and you're going to keep having this big gap. And then you say, "I don't understand why my patients aren't getting surgery." Well, you're not looking at the social determinants. And that's going to be one of the big keys to actually closing that gap. And we know in order to get to an epileptologist, you have to have seen a neurologist, most likely, right? So there's going to be a huge gap in the access to epileptologists. And if there's a gap in access to epileptologists, there's going to be a gap in access to epilepsy surgery. Epilepsy surgery, Jorge Burnio, we heard mentioned earlier today. Sadly, this is the one study on epilepsy surgery looking at disparities. From 2005, he saw that African Americans were 60% less likely to undergo epilepsy surgery. Looking at vagal nerve stimulators, black patients with refractory epilepsy were also less likely to get a VNS. Not a lot of data on deep brain stimulator and responsive neurostimulator, but I am speaking with those companies to find out, to get some access to that race data and see. We suspect there'll be a gap, but it's nice to actually have the numbers so you can actually talk about it, because once you have the numbers, you can actually address it. And then we know that people who have uncontrolled epilepsy are going to have increased risk for sudden death from epilepsy. And this is a study published by one of my former co-fellows, actually, Dan Friedman, who's now at NYU. And they looked at post-mortem cases from the medical examiner's office in San Diego. And what they found was that what was the percentage there? They basically looked at race, and they showed the racial breakdown of the medical examiner's cases. And what they found was black patients made up about 12.5% of the epilepsy-related deaths, and you saw that there were about 10.9% of the SUDEP deaths. And you might look at that number and say, well, 12.5%, that's about what the U.S. population, black people make up about 13%, so it's similar. But when I decided to do a little bit of a deeper dive, looked at San Diego's demographics, and it turns out that San Diego, black people make up about 5% of the population. So there's a tremendous overrepresentation in those SUDEP deaths. And I warned Dan Friedman I would be talking about this and said that wasn't discussed in the paper, this overrepresentation. It was just kind of mentioned, thrown in a table. And so we have to really look at these interpretation of this data, because this is another reason for us to start addressing these social determinants. I put this table together, really looked at, combined 3 different sources of information: the AAN Insights report, the ACGME data, and the AAMC data, just to show you the U.S. population. We see it's about 13.4% black, 18.3% Hispanic, and just trended down. Epilepsy fellows, right now, for the underrepresented in medicine, we see that 9% of the epilepsy fellows are black or Hispanic, and they make up about 10% of the U.S. neurologists. And then I'm going to give you more current data, which is the latest class of epilepsy fellows. or neurology trainees in general. For the 2021-2022 year, we see that 13.6% of epilepsy fellows are from backgrounds underrepresented in medicine, but those two demographics make up 32.8% of the US population. So why do we care about race and ethnicity? Why are we talking about this? Well, we already know that Black and Hispanic physicians and other medical providers are the ones who are most likely to go back and work in these underserved communities. And we also know that these underserved communities have a tendency to trust those physicians and those providers a lot more, especially when you're talking about doing surgery. You want to cut my brain open after you just disrespected me and said so many things about me, my family, and talking about my religion or whatever else it was. I'm not going to trust you to go under the table, put me under anesthesia, and how do I know you're going to even care about my outcome? I mean, how many people have had, I don't know if anybody had surgery before, but I have so many patients who come back and say, the surgeon said the operation was a great success. And I'm all messed up. I'm worse than before the operation. Because they achieved the surgical outcome that they wanted, the surgeon wanted, but it wasn't what the patient was looking for. And so you expect me to trust you. So this is why we really need to try to address this. And so we call it patching the holes in the pipeline. We're always hearing about this pipeline. And one thing I don't say, you'll never hear me say, is talking about achievement gaps, because all that really does is try to put down a particular community. I talk about opportunity gaps. And the opportunity gaps are the sources of those achievement gaps. And the achievement gap kind of puts it on the person, like they just didn't work hard and you just didn't really care. But what opportunities did you actually put before these people? And so I created this little wheel here and say, you start by mentoring and providing opportunities for young people of all backgrounds, right? This is gonna be how you're gonna start leading up to increase the number of underrepresented in medicine who are neurologists who can now become epileptologists. If we say, oh, we gotta increase the number of epileptologists, where are you gonna get them from? You're gonna take 3 from dementia and bring them to epilepsy? Now dementia's complaining that they don't have enough dementia specialists. So we have to actually work on the pipeline and start creating more so that we don't have to worry about fighting with our colleagues in the other subspecialties. Once you do that, you're gonna be increasing access to the epilepsy specialists in those underserved communities. Now you're gonna start improving those epilepsy outcomes, including the epilepsy surgeries that we keep saying are underutilized in all these communities. And then now you're going to start seeing more of these Black, Hispanic patients getting involved in the clinical trials. So now you're getting data from their communities. So now we see how does RNS work in these underserved communities, and how does DBS and VNS and all that stuff, because you don't know, because if you're not studying it, you really don't know. And so if you think I'm going to go through with the surgery and you can't give me data that shows that it actually works in my community, I'm not going to go for it. And then the last piece is it goes right back, because now you've created this whole big list of extra neurologists and epileptologists who can now go back and do the mentoring again to get more people. And so now you've got a robust pipeline that will start taking care of itself. And so I just say closing the treatment gap is really by closing that opportunity gap that we see in these underserved folks. So mentoring, I'm not going to read all this off, but I'm basically showing you that really at every single stage of development, we need to be mentoring these folks, starting from kindergarten. Last month, I was speaking at Black Men's in White Coats event, and I told the story of when I was in maybe 4th or 5th grade, and I said I want to be a doctor, and the response I got was that there are no Black doctors, and I believed it because the one doctor I'd seen was on TV and was a fictional person. And after I told that story, all the other Black men who were in that room that day, who were doctors, said, the same thing happened to me. Every single one has been told that. So we got to really be looking at that. And when that's the message that you're giving to people and you're telling them, and then you start saying, oh yeah, there's an achievement gap. No, it's an opportunity gap. Okay, you have to give these folks the opportunities. And I'm not going to go through, but at every single level, you want to be mindful of that. We created this diversity and research study group. All the people you see here actually presented last month at our New York State Neurological Society annual meeting. The youngest one in this picture Ralph Osias is a senior at Regis High School. First ever student of any type, before any medical student, resident. They put him first as the student presenters in that meeting. And imagine how he feels. Now, how does he feel empowered that he could now become a neurologist? And when he introduced himself, he says, I want to be a neurologist. And I wanted to put a caveat. You want to be an epileptologist. Because we're going to get you there. But he's doing it. And some of these other folks are medical students applying for residency. If you're looking for a good resident, come talk to me. We'll get them in there. And we really want to get them moving and just really involved in these studies. One of our students is going to be presenting this afternoon, actually, Liana. She's a Columbia undergrad. And I just put her poster information right there. We also do some work in Haiti. And you know, I'm gonna tell you my pet peeve. One of the things that happens a lot, people will, you know, a lot of us, I'm sure in here, go to other countries and do this volunteer work. Some people call it voluntourism, where you're getting the benefit. Kind of like some of our clinical trials and research. You're doing research. Is it for you, or is it for the community? Are you trying to help those folks? And so people like to go into these other countries and do this volunteer work. A lot of times while they're there, take a ton of data with them and walk out the door. And the country, the people, the locals never even hear about it. They have no idea what was done with that data, where it was presented, but that person is going to be advancing their career. We work with our colleagues in Haiti. I actually work in the epilepsy clinic down there, and I was born in Haiti. And we took our resident, well, he just graduated medical school, and put him as the first author on this poster that he's going to present this afternoon. You know, let this, and when you start to care about the communities and they see it, right? Because we're coming in there, we're going to show you how to do this research, how to get published, how to do all this stuff. Now you're empowered, and yes, now we trust you with surgery or whatever else it is that we're talking about. And these are some other organizations. You want to get you know, underrepresented folks into your field, into your specialty. The LMSA, the SNMA, all these groups are doing wonderful work. Black Men in White Coats, BINGAP, which has the goal of increasing the number of not just Black, Hispanic, LGBT, really every underrepresented group to increase those numbers in academic medicine. And interestingly, what people don't realize, when it comes to academic medicine, even Asian Americans are underrepresented in academic medicine. So we see the numbers. You saw the charts I showed you earlier that showed you that Asian Americans have a larger percentage when it comes to enrollment in medical school and becoming physicians. But once they get to academic medicine, it's a whole different ballgame. All of a sudden, they're being cut out of the loop. And we see that particularly at the higher ranks. And so BINGAP says, we can't have that. We want all of our folks represented, and we want to be able to, because when it comes to publishing the research and having a seat at the table, you want to have all these groups represented. And it's just not completely happening right now. And of course, I want to put a quick plug in for AES. The AES has the Bridge program, broadening representation, inclusion, and diversity by growing equity. What a clever name. And then there's a Sergievsky Award for Epilepsy, Health, Equity, and Diversity. And I think when you have these types of awards, the AAMC is very clear. This is saying that we care about this, we're promoting it in our organization, and that's how you actually show that. So very, very important. Recruiting pitfalls. So you want to say, oh yeah, I want to get more Black residents into my program. Okay, sure. This is an article that came out about a year ago, Interviewing While Black. I read this article, I said, oh my God, this is, this took 20 years, I interviewed 20 years ago. This is all the stuff that happened to me. When I was at the day before my interview and somebody came out to me and says they think I'm one of the boys from the kitchen, was the way I was received at that program. And guess what? The next day, couldn't talk about it. Who was I going to say it to? Program director? I got called one of the kitchen staff. Nothing wrong with being kitchen staff, but why couldn't I have been the person coming to interview for residency, for the neurology residency, because you're not used to seeing that. So the next day, went to the interview, didn't say anything, but I took action. That program got a nice, comfortable spot at the bottom of my list. I didn't not rank them. I'm smart. I did want to match, and if I had to go there, I'll go. It was a great program, actually. But, you know, that's... So And then here they put a table of various things that are said. The diversity pamphlet. You don't walk over to the Hispanic or a black person and say, "Here's the diversity pamphlet." It's like diversity is for everyone, not just the one person who outwardly looks like they're from what you might call a diverse background. I have my white male students during the pandemic come to me, fourth year, and say, "I cannot believe how offended I was in the interview, seeing how certain applicants were being treated on the interview day, on Zoom," saying they noticed microaggressions that were taking place against these applicants. And it's like, if the student who's just like, the ally just watching is noticing it, imagine how the applicant is feeling on that interview day on Zoom. This was an interview, a paper, "I Can't Breathe During My Interviews: The Incomplete Penetrance of Anti-Racism." Shakura Kemet talks about her experience in interviewing for OBGYN, where they are literally attacking her in the interview because of an article she wrote the year before about how her mom was mistreated when she got diagnosed with cancer. And she says the oncologist immediately came and tried to get the mom to enroll in a clinical trial. Once the mom said no, the oncologist said goodbye. So she wrote about it, published it in the New England Journal of Medicine, and she had to have that litigated all throughout her interview trail. And the New England Journal let her publish that paper. And these are the microaggressions, and this is where I'm going to be pretty much ending, is, these are happening every day. You often don't even know you're committing them, but these are everyday slights, indignities, put-downs, insults that people of color, women, LGBT, all different marginalized people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So oftentimes, people are doing these microaggressions, and they actually think that they are complimenting you. I don't see color. Yeah, you don't see color. What you're basically saying is that you're going to invalidate my entire experience. Last year, I remember one of the medical students says, or 2 years ago, that she had a police officer put a gun to her head, and everyone thought she was lying. And in the meeting, I said, well, when I was a fourth-year medical student, I had about 6 police officers point a gun at me because they thought I had just robbed a store. Why are you invalidating this person's experience? It happens. It's a real thing, okay? And it happens to us, and people you want to deny, you want to invalidate it. It's just not right. We got to believe our students. Not using somebody's pronoun. I've just told you what my pronoun is, and you're going, oh no, I prefer to use this other one that I think yours should be. All these things are invalidating. You're smart for whatever it is. You're smarter than I expected. All these things are just no good. And so now the final piece is the retention piece. So now you've gotten this great diverse class, and everybody's from all different countries or all different languages and different abilities, different genders, everything. We want to talk about a little bit about microaffirmations, because we talk about microaggressions a lot, but what about microaffirmations? These are the ways you actually build up these people that you've gotten into your program and make them really feel welcome, put the big smile on their face so that they really do feel like, I belong here. And that's how you retain people. When I interview chairs for departments in our institution, I ask them all the same question, and these brilliant minds, the majority of them bomb this question because they can't, because they're going to be honest. I always say, you've done amazing work, and you've done such great work, and great accomplishments. Tell me how you've ensured that all the members of your team have been able to share in that success. And they can't, a lot of them, because they're doing it a lot. Some of it is just maybe for themselves or for that small cadre of people who they trust the most. Usually people who are going to be very likely look like them or have similar background, maybe went to the same undergrad or whatever it is, that same special bond, but not reaching out to say, I want every single person in my department to share in the success of the department, because then it's actually ownership. It's our department, not your department. And there are lots of other ways of doing this micro-affirmation. Opening doors of opportunity, like I just said, inviting people. You have a research trial. Let's get some other folks in. Who else could benefit? Who else might be interested in this research? Put it out to everybody. If it's a diversity trial, no, you don't have to just send it to only the black students or only the LGBT students. It goes to everybody because lots of students will be interested in doing this research. So don't close those doors either. Showing inclusion and caring, listening to people, give credit. You know, I've learned this new word of man-planning, I think they call it, something like that, man-explaining. You know, we're in the meeting, you know, it's like, come on, you know, and you have to be mindful of it, you know, and I see it so many times, and I see it and I say, oh wow, that sounds exactly what she just said. Like, yeah, you know, she did say it like that. Yeah, I said, in fact, it was the exact same words. You know, and that's, you know, what are you gonna do? And provide feedback. You know, somebody comes out, if I've got a big old stain on my suit or I've got like toothpaste somewhere on my face, like whatever it is, tell me about it. You know, tell me about it. Because instead of saying, oh yeah, he's just messy, whatever it is, by giving people feedback on your rotation, whatever it is, that's how they actually get better. But I think that is it for me. Impact on clinical practice, obviously, helps your department to gain trust of the community for enhanced partnerships, helps reduce racial ethnic disparities in epilepsy treatment outcomes, and contributes to that decreasing the epilepsy treatment gap, particularly with epilepsy surgery. This is We Belong Here. I was driving in Brooklyn the other day and I saw that outside the Barclays Stadium, so I took a quick picture of it so I could have it for myself. But We Belong Here, that's what you want people to feel in your department, and that's how you retain them. Thank you.